School Board Special Call Meeting, January 26, 2023. Our first order on the agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance by Dr. Amy Conaffey Martin.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. We're going to have a moment of silence. Dr. Sullivan?
Yeah, all right. So we have transportation, so we have three items. We'll start with number one. Number one, termination of contract for bus route 61 per section 2.8. Allison Brown's received a 30-day written notice of breach of contract. Ms. Brown's failed to adequately fulfill the contract obligations. Transportation requests the board to terminate the contract for bus route 61. Recommended approval, motion to approve the termination of contract for bus route 61 as presented, and I would like to have Trey kind of give us the background of how we got here, if the board's okay with that.
All right. Board, you have 4 folders in front of you tonight. 2 of them are by bus number and 2 of them are by individual name. The reason you have this is there's a possibility that multiple drivers over a period of time can drive a bus. So we keep a file for the bus, for the route itself. I don't want to use the bus because the contractor could get a new bus, but that's how they're contracted, is by route, and we use the bus numbers. So you have 61 and 63, and then 2, I'm going to call them personnel files, but one of them is actually a personnel file because it is a driver that is working for a contractor. The second is actually the personnel file for that contractor. So some of the documents are duplicated in both because it affects both parties, but there could be other names or other persons that have had incidents or things on that bus. So the first order of business is bus contract number 61. This is the contract that we were in discussion at our last board meeting. Since that time, we've provided the board with additional information. If you'll notice, on September the 6th of 2022, the contractor was given a 30-day notice per our contract for breach of contract for not adequately staffing the route. We have since worked with the contractor. It has not gotten any better. If anything, it has gotten worse, and at this time we feel it is necessary to request the termination of this contract so that we may offer it back up for another contractor to take so that we can provide services for the students of this area.
Can I ask you about this, just so I can make sure I understand correctly?
Yes, ma'am.
My understanding is there were issues with this bus, and this contractor had other buses and drivers helping her cover this route while the bus was out of service?
That is partially correct.
Okay.
All right. So the process for this under our contract is the contractor is responsible for their route. If they were to have a driver go down sick or a problem with the bus or whatever, they're responsible for coverage of that route. They can rent another bus, they can rent a driver, they can ask their friends who run routes in that area to help them pick up those children and get them to school for a certain period of time. They provide us with that information so that we can notify the parents so that if bus 61 is the normal bus that comes by their house and bus, I'm going to pick a number, 137 is driving in the area adjacent to it and they've agreed to pick up some of the children, their times would vary because they're still running their routes plus they're running these others. That is the purpose for them having to give us this information. Then we would send out a phone call, a student messenger call to those parents so that they would know a different bus and a possible different time. We work with the contractors in that way. Some contractors pay their buddies, some contractors get help for free. We don't get involved in that because they are paid to manage that area. If they come to us and say, I can't get coverage, can you help me? then we will solicit participation from other drivers. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. If they do, and those contractors request compensation because they're paid by the mile, they would be running additional miles. Monthly, they provide to us a mileage form, which verifies their mileage for the month. So if they drove 50 miles on their normal route and they ran an extra 10 miles a day to help this route out, they would get paid additionally for those 10 miles, and we take that money from the contractor who holds the contract. In this condition, the contractor had informed us they had the route covered, when in actuality they did not. At that point, we began to supplement because of the phone calls we were getting from our parents from other buses. So it's been a combination of they've covered some, we've covered some, and some have had no coverage. And it has changed throughout this entire school year. Some weeks it's one way and some weeks it's another. It's been very difficult on the parents, the students, and our staff.
And how many routes does this contractor have?
This contractor currently holds 4 routes. This is one of the 4.
And out of those 4 routes, in the past, let's say 5 months, 6 months, this has been going on, how many drivers?
She's been down a driver, so she would have 3.
But we're paying her for, or the Board of
We
Education.
have been paying for 4 routes, yes.
Whenever there's an incident like bus breaks down, something that causes the bus itself to be set back, there are, like you mentioned, there are other programs to get a bus.
Yes, there are contractors who have taken buses out of service early. They can only run a bus for a certain amount of years, and then by state law, they have to be taken out. And there's some contractors that have chosen to take a bus down 3 or 4 years early, and they make that available to other contractors. There's also some of the local bus sales companies also provide loaner buses. I have no idea what their rental rates are, but there are other avenues to pursue to fulfill that route.
Correct. And if there isn't coverage provided, it's usually done on a temporary basis. So
Yes,
if it ends up being a long-term issue, then it would more fall on the responsibility of the contractor just to turn the route back in and say, I can't get coverage.
That is correct. Most contractors after, and I'm going to pick a short period time, 1 to 3 months, if they see they're not going to be able to get a driver, or the bus is going to take longer, or they just decide it's not worth the effort anymore, they voluntarily turn those routes in. At our last board meeting, there was 4 routes on the consent agenda that were voluntarily terminated. Various number of reasons, but some of these exact reasonings were why those routes were turned in.
Thank you.
For motion? Okay, so I will entertain a motion. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Rosales. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or wish to abstain? Motion passes to approve the termination of contract for the bus Route 61.
All right, second, driver suspension. So Transportation is requesting approval of a 1-year driver suspension for Makika Brown due to incidents which occurred on Monday, January 23rd and Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. Recommended approval, motion to approve a 1-year driver suspension for Ms. Brown as presented. To the audience, we are going to mute this video, so we're going to show a little bit over a 10-minute video. You'll be able to see the stream, but we are, because of explicit language, going to mute the video, so that will not be there.
And this is the video from that second day that you mentioned?
Yes, this is the
Morning
video
route.
from Tuesday.
Let's give
January
everybody
20th.
just another minute to mute if they want to. Thank you.
delay.
We're waiting a few minutes so we can turn the mute off from the video. So just bear with us. Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Just a couple quick comments for our people in the audience. I apologize for the explicit language that you had to hear, but I felt like with us being school board, being public officials, it was appropriate for them to see the reason for the appropriate action for tonight. But again, the explicit language is why we asked for that to be muted. We also moved the video over, not trying to hide anything, but trying to hide the students' faces so that we couldn't identify students because they are minors on that video. So I wanted to give that explanation of that information. So you've seen the information. Mr. Lee, is there anything you want to add to that?
This is the second altercation. The first altercation was with the same children and the parent. With that altercation on Monday, the parent did contact the transportation department. We requested the video to be pulled. Unfortunately, by the time we got the video, this second incident had happened. And just for everyone's knowledge, a contractor is required to carry every child on that stop that requests transportation. The only person who can take a child off a bus is the principal of the school that the child attends or the district office. The bus drivers do not have the authority to take a child off a bus. Until we as a district determine that a child does not get transportation services, they are required to carry the child. In situations where we do feel that there is a issue between the child and the bus driver, we have made special accommodations. We would ask a driver that's in an adjacent area to slide over and pick up one child. We've done that to try and work with students in school and everyone else. So I do want you all to understand that it is not the driver's prerogative to do that. We do not take suspension of a driver lightly. This is something we have done in the past, but it's always been in extreme circumstances. I personally feel everyone deserves a second chance. That's why I did not request permanent banment, requested a year. If this young lady can get some help to deal with her interaction with students and parents and those kind of things, and can come back to us with, that information in a year, I'm willing to give her a second chance. That's the reason we ask for 1 year and not a permanent ban.
And I'll
be glad to answer any other questions you may have.
I'll also add, part of the reason we're here tonight is that bus drivers are technically, and contractors are not Rutherford County school employees, and so they are a contracted service, and this bus driver then is an employee for the contractor. But we are requesting to do this in lieu of the incidents that happened.
Mr. Lee, the way this is written, it's just a 1-year suspension. Are you wanting to make the 1-year suspension contingent upon her showing that she's received some services, as you mentioned?
I think that should be the expectation, yes, ma'am.
Can you speak upon what the proper channels are? You had mentioned that the principals are the ones who can remove a child from the bus, but what will have been the proper channels if there was a behavior problem with the students and that occurred in the bus? Because at the end of the day, even though a school bus is not a building, it's still an extension to the school. So can you please speak upon what the proper channels are to dealing with behavior issues that occurred in the bus?
Each bus driver has a set of form. It's called a write-up form. If they have any issue on a bus, whether the child has torn the seat or won't sit down or won't follow instruction or has been ruly or whatever, they have a form that they fill out and they give it to the school. Like if a child acts up on a morning route, they would typically do, if they have time, they would do a write-up that morning. Sometimes the drivers don't because they're running elementary, middle, and high. If it's an elementary child, they may not write that child up immediately, but they would write that child up after they've completed their route, and when they go back to the elementary school that afternoon, they turn that write-up into the principal. Once the principal has determined what the appropriate action is, then they send the transportation department the write-up form so that we can then work with the contractors. We're in the process, and hopefully by the beginning of the next school year, we're looking at an electronic format, because the disconnect for the transportation department is once that write-up's turned in, one, we may or may not be aware that they've turned a write-up in on a child. And if the school takes disciplinary action but does not send the form on to us, it may delay what's happened. And the contractors sometimes think that the school's not doing anything, when in reality, they may have. So we're working to make that system better next year. It's an electronic system, but it's a system that's been in place long as I've been here, and it's in triplicate, so the driver keeps a copy when they make it, the school gets a copy, and then they send us a copy, and everybody's got a copy.
More than 20 years at least. Not saying I would have ever received one, I'm just saying out there. Probably over 30 years, actually.
But if we get to a point where we have an impasse, where let's say the driver still has trouble but doesn't feel like the student and the school, they reach out to us. I've had numerous meetings in the last 3.5 years in my tenure as overseeing the transportation department, where we would go meet with the principal. We would work something out. There's been situations where students would have no way to get to school, but there's something there that for some reason that driver and that student just have a personality conflict. We work something out to get that child to school. It's a dire, serious, even students that get remanded to our alternative schools still are allowed to ride our buses. So there is a protocol in place, and we do follow it.
Can a bus driver, as a form of punishment, assign a child to a seat in the bus? Is that possible?
Yes,
Okay.
they are allowed to sign seats. And we do have some contractors that don't do it as punishment. It's their standard protocol, and they start the school year every year. Day one, once they learn their students, they get assigned a seat, and they sit in those seats every day. We have other contractors that allow students to sit wherever they want, as long as they can behave and they're, not a disruption while they're driving, they're allowed to sit. We leave that up to the bus contractors themselves.
About the form that the bus driver could fill out about a complaint on the student or have an issue, one of the concerns or complaints that I heard from bus contractors was that if there is a punishment, they don't always know what it is. And if we could bridge that communication.
And that's the purpose of us trying to get to this electronic format, because once they get that uploaded, they would upload the write-up electronically, and it would come to the transportation office as well as the school at the same time, like an email that goes to two recipients. Then the school, once they've made their determination, they would put it back in, and then we would know, and the contractor would know also at the same time what that is. And that's what we're working to bridge, so that communication is much clearer and much quicker.
And they see that we're acting on it.
Yes, that is correct. And that's the purpose for the format that we're working towards for the beginning of next year.
And what's the expectation that once they submit that form, what is the turnaround time?
It depends. Each school is different. I would say
Within a
1 to
week.
3 days, I
Within
would
a
think.
week. That's how we try to handle every discipline issue.
I'd like to ask you another question. I'm sorry, did I jump in front of you there? I'm sorry. One more question about this. So she was suspended. What day was she suspended? The driver.
Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning. Who was driving this bus on Wednesday?
She was.
Who was driving in the morning?
Yes.
In the afternoon?
Yes.
Was she driving this morning?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Lee, because I've seen almost the entirety of the video, I know the police were called to one of the days. Were the police summoned to the scene on both days or just one day?
Just the second day.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? We have a motion on the floor to suspend one-year drivers for Makia Brown.
I move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you so much. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone wish to abstain or Motion passes to suspend the drivers.
All right, and then last, number 3, suspension of contract bus 163 based on the information provided showing the contractor's disregard to the notice of driver suspension. The Transportation Department is requesting the suspension of the contract for bus route 163. Recommended approval, motion to suspend the contract for bus route 163 is presented. Mr. Lee?
Yes, based on the information that we have and the numerous notifications that we gave this contractor, and it's willful, and knowing disregard for the direct instruction of the Transportation Department, we're asking that this driver be put on 30-day notice, and that we will send out the 30-day notice letter first thing in the morning.
Any questions or comments? The motion on the floor is suspend the contract for bus route 63 as presented.
Or
163, excuse
are
me.
you saying, when you say suspend for 30 days, you're talking about the contractor?
This contractor from running this route.
Okay.
And that will give them time to put in, an opportunity to put in place an acceptable driver and bus to run this route. If at the end of 30 days, we do not have an acceptable coverage for this route, I will be back here asking for termination permanent.
So this is to find a replacement for the driver?
This is putting the driver on 30-day notice because they will have to
Right.
find another driver.
Correct.
And in the meantime, I don't want to take an opportunity for this bus to be driven by someone that is not approved. And therefore, I'm asking that 30-day, we take it, we will find coverage for the next 30 days. If the driver can find acceptable coverage prior to the 30 days, I'm willing to let it go back in. But the 30 days is what's required in our contract to allow us to terminate the contract. So I'm starting that 30-day process. If we can fix it to where they can continue, I'm willing to work with the contractor. If they cannot, I'm starting the clock so that in 30 days I can come back before you and ask for termination to put it back out for another contractor.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. I'll entertain a motion.
I move.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell.
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Bratton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or wish to abstain? Motion passes to suspend the contract for bus route 163. Thank you so much. Anyone have an opposition to adjourning?
I would like to make one comment. I did notice in the file here that this contractor has had some issues with having an unqualified driver at times, driving the bus, and also using a cell phone while driving the bus with children on the bus. How many of those type incidents do we allow before we say no more?
I'm saying no more at this point. That's why I'm asking for the 30 days.
I'd just like to make a comment too. Obviously, I think some of the behavior was sufficient for the suspension, but when a suspended driver continues to drive, I think maybe there should be another decision made beyond that. I believe you're extending grace here, but I think the board should look at that. We don't want to send the wrong signal to our contractors that if they get suspended, they can continue to move on as necessary.
And I apologize for having to have this special called meeting, but that was the reason that we requested it, is because I felt like we were going down that road, and I did not want to do that. And I'll be honest, the safety of our children is what's paramount for us, all of us here. And I felt like we were getting into an area that I didn't want to be in, and I didn't want to wait.
So this driver was also in an accident. That accident was the fault, the driver or the other car involved?
It looked like it was the other person's fault.
The accident report kind of leans both ways, where maybe there was some fault, but the driver was cited for, now, I don't want to use the wrong terminology. I got so many folders, I apologize. Reckless, careless, undue care. Also cited for no proof of insurance, which is a non-moving violation, but it's still required, and no registration on the bus.
So, hearing that, I'm glad we're taking care of business tonight, but wouldn't that be an automatic
Yeah.
suspension if they get into if they get into an accident and then it's found that they're cited reckless, no proof of insurance? I mean, there were minors that were injured as well, that will be an automatic suspension, and then rather than waiting for something.
We just
else.
got the report today.
Oh, okay, well, fair enough.
So the answer to your question is we do weigh those factors in determining what we do. At a minimum, it would have been a letter of reprimand put in their file. That would have been the minimum that would have happened. And we have suspended drivers in the past for these types of things. They just typically don't come before the board because I'm the designee and the transportation director or the designee of the director of schools, and we have the power or the authority, not power, the authority to make these decisions. And typically the contractors are cooperative. This is my first time dealing with one that was not.
So in the contract, because I don't know what exactly was in the contract, but the proof of insurance, that's very concerning to me. I have kids, I have children that ride the bus, and if something happens and it's found that they don't have proof of insurance, is it stipulated in the contract that the driver not having insurance, will that be a breach of contract?
They don't carry the insurance, we do. So we give them the form. It's not even their
Okay.
insurance, it's our insurance. So they carry, the only insurance they carry is
Okay.
when they're hauling.
So they just did not have the paperwork?
They didn't have the paperwork.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying, because the report made it seem like they just did not have insurance, period.
Can we change
Oh,
the
thank
policy?
you.
Because driving while you're suspended is kind of like a legal thing to me. It's like driving when on a suspended license, and it's a big no-no in the real world.
That would
So
be-
why can't
that-
we make that termination right there?
That would be something that would have to be negotiated into the contract.
I think that's something to look into.
Yes.
We can't have this going on.
Monica?
Yes, the current contract is through the 2024-25 school year.
Can we amend it?
If we can get them all to sign it.
Yes.
If you get
It
what?
takes both parties to make an amendment to the,
Has this issue ever come up again where someone's been suspended and they've driven their bus?
not to my knowledge, no.
I don't see where the other bus contractors might not be okay. They would be okay with this. I can't imagine that they wouldn't.
They were not happy. I got several phone calls. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up. I know it's been a long night. We met earlier with our state representatives. Thank you, school board members and staff for staying extra and preparing for tonight. I appreciate you. Some of us will be at Holloway tomorrow for lunch. So full disclaimer to our media that's here tonight. And thank you all of the schools that have sent us school board appreciation.
Yes.
Yes, thank
Things.
you.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to be adjourned. Thank you.